Mia's small fingers tightened around her mother's hand as they strolled through the lively neighborhood park. The sun hung high in the sky, casting golden light over the green grass, where children laughed and played. The warm breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass and the distant aroma of a barbecue. It was a perfect summer afternoon, the kind of day that made everything feel light, happy, and full of possibility. But then something caught Mia's eye. A small shape curled tightly beneath a wooden park bench, almost hidden in the shade. It was so still that at first she wasn't sure if it was even real. But then, as she took a slow step forward, she saw a faint movement, a trembling chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. A dog. Mia let go of her mother's hand without thinking, her little feet moving toward the bench. The closer she got, the clearer she could see. The dog's fur was tangled and dirty, matted in places like it hadn't been brushed in weeks. It wasn't big, maybe just a puppy, but its small frame looked frail, as if it hadn't eaten in a long time. Its ears drooped, its body tense, as if it was expecting something bad to happen. Mia's heart squeezed. "Mama," she whispered, barely turning her head. "Look!" Mama Tasha, who had been adjusting the bag on her shoulder, turned toward her daughter. Her eyes followed Mia's outstretched finger and landed on the dog. She frowned slightly. "Oh, baby. Don't get too close." But Mia didn't stop. She crouched down a few feet away, her movements slow and gentle, the way she had learned to approach butterflies in the garden. "Hey there, little doggy," she whispered, her voice soft, warm, like the sunlight filtering through the trees. The dog's head barely lifted. It didn't run, but it also didn't move closer. It just stared at her, brown eyes wide and uncertain, like it wasn't sure whether to trust or fear. Mia extended her hand slightly, palm up, the way she had seen people do with scared animals on TV. "It's okay," she coaxed. "I'm nice." A long, quiet moment passed, and then, just barely, the dog shifted. It moved its paw, almost like it was testing whether it was safe. Mia held her breath. The dog slowly, hesitantly, stretched its nose forward, sniffing at the air between them. It was still wary, its body tense, but it didn't move away. And to Mia, that felt like the tiniest spark of hope. Mama Tasha sighed, stepping closer. "Mia, sweetie, we can't just take home a stray dog. It might have an owner." Mia glanced up, her brown eyes pleading. "But Mama, look at him. He's all alone." Tasha hesitated. She was a practical woman, not one to make impulsive decisions. But looking at the way the dog trembled, the way it shrank against the bench like it was afraid of being seen, even she couldn't deny what was obvious. This wasn't someone's well-loved pet who had just wandered too far. Still, she tried to reason with her daughter. "Maybe we should ask around, see if anyone knows where he came from." But as she said it, a small, unexpected thing happened. The dog, who had been frozen with fear, did something so subtle, so heartbreaking, that it made even Tasha's breath hitch. It inched forward, just a little, toward Mia, not toward Tasha, not toward the safety of adults who might provide food and shelter, but toward the tiny girl who had spoken to him in kindness. Mia barely moved, not wanting to startle him, but a slow smile stretched across her face. "See, Mama? He trusts me." Tasha exhaled slowly. This was one of those moments, one of those small, unplanned forks in life's path where a single choice could change everything. She could walk away, pretend they never saw the dog, tell Mia it wasn't their responsibility, or she could say yes. And the look in her daughter's eyes, the sheer, unfiltered compassion, made her decision for her. Tasha knelt beside Mia, keeping her voice low and steady. "Okay," she murmured. "But let's be careful. We don't know if he's sick or scared." Mia nodded quickly, her small fingers itching to touch the dog, but knowing better than to move too fast. Tasha slowly reached into her bag, pulling out a leftover piece of chicken from their picnic. She broke it into small pieces and placed one on the ground, a few inches from the dog. The dog hesitated, sniffing the air again. His body stayed stiff, but his nose twitched, drawn toward the scent. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. And then, just as Mia thought he might refuse, the dog took a slow, cautious step forward. Mia's heart soared. He sniffed the food once, twice, then took the smallest bite, chewing slowly like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to eat. Tasha watched carefully. "He's hungry," she murmured. Mia beamed. "Then we have to help him, Mama." Tasha let out another sigh, but this time, there was the tiniest hint of a smile. "You really love animals, don't you?" she said, more as a statement than a question. Mia nodded eagerly. "I love all of them, even the ones nobody else wants." And somehow, that was all the answer Tasha needed. She reached for her phone, opening the camera. "Let's take a picture of him. We'll ask around, make sure no one's looking for him first. But if no one claims him—" She glanced at Mia, a knowing look in her eyes. Mia's breath caught. "Really?" Tasha gave a small shrug. "I guess we might have room for one more." Mia turned back to the dog, her smile so bright it could have rivaled the sun. "Did you hear that, little doggy?" she whispered. "Maybe you're not alone anymore." And for the first time since they found him, the dog did something Mia had been waiting for. His tail, small, weak, uncertain, gave the tiniest wag. And in that moment, Mia knew. This was only the beginning. Mia sat in the back seat, her small hands gently cradling the trembling dog in her lap. Toby, as she had already decided to name him, remained stiff, his tiny body still pressed close to her, but not in comfort. More like uncertainty, like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to be there at all. His fur was rough beneath her fingers, tangled and unkempt, and even as she tried to stroke him softly, she could feel the way his muscles tensed with every movement of the car. "It's okay, Toby," she whispered, her voice filled with warmth. "We're going home now." From the driver's seat, Mama Tasha glanced in the rearview mirror. She had agreed to bring the dog home, but her heart was still weighed down with questions. What if he was sick? What if he never adjusted? What if he belonged to someone, and they had to return him? The last thing she wanted was for Mia to get attached only to have her heart broken. The drive was quiet, aside from the occasional hum of passing cars. Toby didn't make a sound, not even a whimper. It was as if he had learned that silence was the safest way to exist. Mia, on the other hand, kept murmuring to him, telling him about her house, about her stuffed animals, about how she was going to give him the softest bed and the best food. She talked as if he understood every word, as if her voice alone could convince him that his life was about to change for the better. When they pulled into the driveway, Toby lifted his head ever so slightly, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. Mia carefully unbuckled her seatbelt, her excitement bubbling over. "Come on, Toby! You're gonna love it here!" But as soon as she slid out of the car and tried to guide him with her, Toby froze. He planted his paws firmly on the seat, his body trembling, his eyes darting around as if he were preparing for something bad to happen. He wouldn't move, not even a little. Mama Tasha sighed as she stepped out and walked around to the other side. "Sweetheart, he's scared," she said gently. Mia frowned, confused. "But there's nothing to be scared of. This is home. For us," Tasha reminded her, "but not for him. Not yet." Mia's face fell slightly as she looked back at Toby, whose brown eyes were filled with uncertainty. He didn't seem to trust that this wasn't another temporary stop, another place where he might be unwanted. Instead of pulling or forcing him, Mia made a decision. She sat down right there on the car seat beside him, her legs dangling over the edge. "It's okay, Toby. she said softly. "You can take your time." A moment passed, then another. The summer breeze ruffled her curly hair, and the warm afternoon sunlight cast long shadows on the pavement. Finally, after what felt like forever, Toby took a hesitant step forward. Mia held her breath, and then, as if gathering every ounce of courage he had left, he stepped down onto the ground. His legs were shaky, his tail still tucked between his hind legs, but he was moving. "That's my boy," Mia whispered with a bright smile. Tasha led them toward the house, keeping an eye on Toby's movements. He walked hesitantly, his body low to the ground, as if expecting the earth beneath him to disappear at any moment. The moment they stepped through the front door, he stopped again, his paws hovering over the threshold. Mia turned back, noticing his hesitation. She didn't rush him. "It's okay, Toby," she said again. "This is your home now." Slowly, cautiously, Toby crossed the doorway. Inside, Mia had already prepared a small corner for him, a cozy little bed with soft blankets, a small bowl of water beside it. "This is for you," she said, guiding him toward it. "See? Just for you." But Toby didn't rush toward the bed, didn't curl up as Mia had imagined. Instead, he backed himself into a corner near the wall, eyes darting from one side of the room to the other. His body pressed against the floor, ears pinned back. Mama Tasha sighed, watching him. "It's going to take time, baby." Mia nodded, even though her heart ached to see him so scared. "I'll wait," she promised. That night, as the house settled into quiet, Mia lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. The moonlight poured through the window, casting a soft glow over her room. She had left the door slightly open, just in case Toby wanted to come in. She listened carefully, hoping to hear his tiny footsteps. Minutes passed, then an hour, and just as she was about to drift off to sleep, she heard it. A soft shuffling sound. Her heart jumped. Slowly, she turned her head toward the doorway. There, standing just inside her room, was Toby. His small frame was barely visible in the dim light, but his brown eyes glowed with something different. Not fear exactly, but hesitation, curiosity. Mia didn't move. She didn't call out to him, didn't rush to grab him. Instead, she simply turned onto her side, making space at the foot of her bed. She let out a soft, sleepy whisper. "It's okay, Toby." A long moment passed, and then, ever so slowly, Toby took a step forward. Then another. And finally, after what felt like forever, he curled up at the foot of her bed. Mia smiled into the darkness. Maybe he wasn't ready to trust completely yet. But this was a start. The days that followed were filled with quiet patience. Mia understood, even at her young age, that Toby needed time. He was still learning what it meant to be safe, to be wanted. Every movement he made was slow, careful, as if he feared the world might collapse beneath his small paws at any moment. But Mia was patient. She never forced him to play, never tried to hold him when he wasn't ready. Instead, she let him exist on his own terms. She read books out loud, hoping the gentle sound of her voice would soothe him. She placed small treats near his bed, waiting for the moment he would feel brave enough to take them. It was a process, one that tested her in ways she didn't fully understand. She wanted so badly to see Toby wag his tail, to see him run freely in the yard, to know that he trusted her completely. But trust wasn't something that could be given all at once. It had to be built, piece by piece. And then, one day, something changed. Mia was playing in the backyard, rolling a bright yellow ball back and forth in the grass. She wasn't even thinking about Toby at that moment. She was just enjoying the warmth of the sun and the softness of the breeze. Then she felt it. A presence behind her. A quiet, hesitant kind of curiosity. She turned her head slowly, careful not to startle him. Toby was watching. His brown eyes were locked onto the ball, his ears perked ever so slightly. Mia's heart swelled. She didn't say anything at first. She simply rolled the ball forward, watching as it tumbled a few feet away. Toby didn't move. She rolled it again. Still, he stood frozen. But the third time, when the ball came to a slow stop just inches from his paws, something shifted. Toby looked at it. His nose twitched. His tail, though still low, gave a tiny flick. And then, to Mia's absolute delight, he nudged it, just slightly. Mia's smile stretched wide, but she didn't clap or cheer. She knew that would startle him. Instead, she whispered softly, "Good boy, Toby." For the first time she saw it, the tiniest wag. It wasn't much, just a flicker of motion, but to Mia it was everything. That small moment became the foundation of something bigger. Each day, Toby grew braver. He started following Mia around the house, always keeping a few feet of distance, but never letting her out of his sight. He still flinched at loud noises, still cowered when an unfamiliar voice filled the room, but he no longer hid in the corners. He was learning. And Mia, more than anyone, understood what an honor it was to be the one he was learning to trust. But then, something happened that neither of them expected. It was an ordinary afternoon. The sun was warm, the air filled with the scent of blooming flowers. Mia was playing outside again, this time kicking a ball gently across the yard. Toby sat near the porch, watching her like he always did. Then came the sound, a sudden, sharp yelp, high-pitched and desperate. Mia spun around, her heart hammering. She saw it immediately. A smaller child, a boy no older than 4, was standing near the edge of the park behind their house. His tiny hands clutched at his ankle, and his face was scrunched in pain. Mia didn't hesitate. She ran toward him, her feet pounding against the grass. "Are you okay?" she called. The boy whimpered, looking up at her with tear-filled eyes. "It hurts," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mia looked down and saw the problem. A sharp thorn, thick and twisted, had lodged itself into the side of his foot. He must have stepped on it while running barefoot. She knelt down beside him. "It's okay," she said soothingly. "I'll get my mom. She can help." But before she could even take a step back toward the house, something incredible happened. Toby moved. Not just cautiously, not hesitantly. He moved with purpose. In an instant, he was at Mia's side, his nose pressing gently against the boy's arm. His tail wasn't tucked anymore. It was held, not high, but steady. His eyes weren't wide with fear. They were filled with something new, something stronger. The boy sniffled, his fingers curling into Toby's fur. He seemed to forget his pain, at least for a moment. "Doggy," he murmured. Mia felt her throat tighten. Toby wasn't just watching anymore. He wasn't just existing in the background, waiting for the world to prove it was safe. He was stepping forward. Mia called for her mom, and within moments, Mama Tasha was there, carefully pulling the thorn from the little boy's foot and offering him words of comfort. His mother arrived soon after, thanking them over and over. But Mia's focus was on Toby. As the boy was carried away, Toby didn't shrink back. He didn't run. He sat beside Mia, his body pressed lightly against her, as if he knew, without a doubt, that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. That night, as Mia curled up in bed, Toby did something he had never done before. He jumped up beside her, not at the foot of the bed, not with caution. He lay down right next to her, his body warm against hers, his head resting beside her pillow. Mia didn't say a word. She just smiled, her fingers threading gently through his fur. Toby had found his place, and he had chosen to stay. The transformation in Toby was becoming more obvious with each passing day. Little changes that, at first, might have gone unnoticed. He no longer hesitated before stepping into the house. He no longer jumped at every sound. The look of fear in his eyes had softened, replaced by something gentler, something hopeful. His tail, once permanently tucked between his legs, had started to lift slightly, especially when Mia came home from school. It wasn't just that Toby was adjusting. He was beginning to thrive. But Mia didn't realize just how special he was until one fateful afternoon. It started like any other day. The sun was warm, a soft breeze rustled the trees, and Mia was playing outside, tossing a small rope toy across the yard. She had tried to get Toby to chase after toys before, but he had never shown much interest. Sometimes he would watch her play, ears perked with curiosity, but he never joined in. But today was different. Mia threw the toy, watching as it tumbled across the grass. As usual, she didn't expect much. But then, from the corner of her eye, she noticed movement. Toby had perked up. His ears stood tall, his eyes locked onto the toy as it rolled to a stop. Mia held her breath. For a moment, he hesitated. Then, without warning, he bolted forward. Mia's heart leapt in excitement. Toby ran. No, he flew across the yard. His paws barely seemed to touch the ground. He reached the toy in seconds, snatched it up in his mouth, and sprinted back toward her with effortless speed. Mia gasped. "Toby, you did it!" she cried, laughing as he dropped the toy at her feet, panting slightly but looking pleased with himself. That was the moment she realized. Toby wasn't just playing. He was fast. Faster than any dog Mia had ever seen. From that day forward, playtime changed. Toby no longer sat on the sidelines. He ran, he chased, he jumped. He leaped over bushes with ease, zigzagged through trees like he had done it 100 times before. His movements weren't just quick. They were precise, calculated. Mama Tasha noticed it too. One evening, as she watched Mia and Toby play from the porch, she crossed her arms, an unreadable expression on her face. "He moves like he's trained," she murmured to herself. Mia, overhearing, turned to her mother. "Trained?" Her mother nodded slowly. "Look at him. The way he cuts through turns, the way he anticipates where the ball is going to land. That's not just instinct. That's learned." Mia frowned, considering her mother's words. "Do you think someone trained him before?" Tasha exhaled thoughtfully. "Maybe. Or maybe he's just a natural." A silence settled between them before Mama Tasha pulled out her phone. "There's an agility event at the park this weekend," she said. "Nothing serious, just a fun run for dogs to try out obstacle courses." Mia's eyes widened. "You mean like a competition?" "Not really a competition," Tasha corrected. "Just a way to see what he can do." Mia turned to Toby, who was panting happily beside her, his tongue lolling out. "What do you think, Toby? You want to try?" He wagged his tail, and that was all the answer she needed. The agility event. That Saturday, they arrived at the park early. The agility course was simple. Basic jumps, tunnels, weaving poles. Dogs of all sizes were there, some sleek and trained, others just having fun. Mia felt nervous as she watched them, but Toby sat beside her, eyes sharp, watching every movement like he was studying the course. When their turn came, Mia took a deep breath. "All right, boy, let's do this." She led him to the starting line, her palms slightly sweaty. The whistle blew. Toby took off. And in that moment, everyone watching realized they weren't just looking at an ordinary dog. He didn't hesitate. He soared over the hurdles, landing gracefully on the other side before sprinting toward the next. He wove through the poles like he had done it 100 times before. The tunnel, which had made some of the other dogs hesitate, barely slowed him down. He was effortless, fluid, like he was born for this. When he crossed the finish line, the entire park was silent for a moment. Then an eruption of applause. Mia could hardly breathe. "Toby, you're amazing," she whispered, throwing her arms around him. A man approached, an older gentleman with a clipboard. "That's one talented dog," he said, looking impressed. "Has he competed before?" Mia shook her head quickly. No, this is his first time. The man raised an eyebrow. You should consider training him properly. With the right coaching, he could be one of the best. Mama Tasha stepped forward. Are you saying he has a natural ability for this? The trainer smiled. I'm saying he might have been trained before. Mia's heart skipped a beat. Trained? But he was just a stray. The trainer shrugged. Sometimes dogs get abandoned even when they have potential. It's possible someone started training him but gave up on him. Mia looked at Toby, who was sitting at her feet panting happily. Had he belonged to someone before? Had he once been wanted, only to be discarded when he wasn't perfect enough? Her chest tightened. It didn't matter what had happened in the past. Toby was here now, and he was hers. That night, back at home, Mia sat on the floor beside Toby, running her fingers gently through his fur. The moonlight filtered through the window, casting soft shadows across the room. She sighed. Did you belong to someone before? She whispered. Did they love you? Toby didn't answer, of course. But as he rested his head on her lap, letting out a soft sigh, she made him a silent promise. No matter what happened before, she murmured, you'll never have to wonder if you belong again. Toby closed his eyes, his breathing steady. For the first time, Mia thought she saw it. Not just comfort, not just trust, but peace. And that was enough. Mia could still feel the lingering excitement from the agility event as she sat on the living room floor, running her fingers through Toby's soft fur. The way he had flown through the obstacles, the way the crowd had erupted in applause, it had been the happiest she had ever seen him. He wasn't just a rescued dog anymore. He was something extraordinary. She glanced up at Mama Tasha, who was scrolling through her phone with a thoughtful expression. Mama, Mia murmured, do you think Toby was meant to find us? Her mother looked up, a soft smile tugging at her lips. I think sometimes the ones who need love the most find exactly where they're supposed to be. Mia grinned, hugging Toby closer. He had been hers from the moment she saw him under that park bench. Nothing could change that now, or so she thought. The trouble started the next day. It was early afternoon when the doorbell rang. Toby, still getting used to the sound, lifted his head, ears perking slightly but not barking. That, in itself, was unusual. He had grown comfortable with their home, and now he at least let out a small warning bark whenever a stranger approached. Mama Tasha wiped her hands on a kitchen towel as she walked to the door. Probably a package, she muttered. But when she opened it, her entire body tensed. Standing on the porch was a man, middle-aged, tall, wearing a faded baseball cap. His eyes immediately flicked past her, scanning the house. Tasha's grip on the doorknob tightened. Can I help you? His gaze settled on her, and he let out a low chuckle. Yeah, I think you have my dog. A cold weight dropped into Mia's stomach. She had been sitting on the floor with Toby, but now she scrambled to her feet. Mama? Tasha didn't move. Excuse me? The man shifted his stance, resting a hand on his hip. That dog. He tilted his chin toward Toby, who was now stiff, his body tense beside Mia. I saw him at the agility event. That's my dog. Mia's arms instinctively wrapped around Toby. No, he's not, she said, her voice small but firm. The man's mouth twitched in amusement, but his eyes were sharp. I had him trained, spent good money on him, but he ran off a while back. Been looking for him ever since. Mama Tasha didn't flinch. You have proof of ownership? The man scoffed. He knows me. That should be proof enough. Mia's heart pounded. She turned to look at Toby, her fingers gripping his fur. He wasn't growling, wasn't barking, but he wasn't running toward the man either. He was completely still, his eyes locked onto him, his breathing shallow, like he was afraid. Mama Tasha straightened, her voice calm but unwavering. If you don't have documentation, then I'm afraid this conversation is over. The man's easy smirk faltered. Look, lady, I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just want my dog back. Mia felt her chest tighten. He wasn't your dog when you left him behind. He wasn't your dog when he was starving on the streets. He wasn't your dog when he was too afraid to even lift his head. She wanted to scream it at him. Instead, she whispered, "He's my family." Mama Tasha stepped in front of Mia, her voice even. "You need to leave now." The man's jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, Mia thought he might argue, but then he exhaled sharply, taking a step back. "This isn't over," he muttered. Then he turned and walked away. The moment the door shut, Mia dropped to her knees, hugging Toby as tightly as she could. "I won't let him take you," she whispered into his fur. "I promise." Mama Tasha pulled out her phone, her expression unreadable. "We need to be prepared," she murmured. "I'm calling a lawyer." The next few days were tense. Every time the doorbell rang, Mia's heart leapt into her throat. She couldn't shake the fear that the man would come back, that he would find some way to take Toby away. But Mama Tasha was already 3 steps ahead. She had gathered every vet record, every photograph of Toby's condition when they first found him, and written testimonies from their neighbors and the Agility event staff. Their lawyer, a woman named Ms. Patterson, met with them in their living room, flipping through the documents with a nod of approval. "You have a strong case," she said, adjusting her glasses. "This man abandoned the dog. The key will be proving that he didn't attempt to find Toby before now." Mia clenched her fists. "He didn't even care about him until he saw how good he was." Ms. Patterson's gaze softened. "And that's going to work in our favor." Still, the court hearing loomed over them like a storm cloud. Mia barely slept the night before. She kept her arms wrapped around Toby, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "I'll protect you," she whispered, "no matter what." The day of the hearing was cold. The courtroom felt too big, too formal. Mia sat beside Mama Tasha, gripping her hand tightly as they faced the man across the room. He had a lawyer, too, but he didn't have proof. Ms. Patterson laid out their case methodically, presenting Toby's medical records, the photos of his malnourished state when they rescued him, and the testimonies of the agility trainers who had never seen the man before. When it was Mia's turn to speak, she took a deep breath and faced the judge. "He was alone when I found him," she said, her voice strong despite the lump in her throat. "He was scared. He didn't have a collar. He didn't have anyone looking for him. But I stayed. I showed him that he didn't have to be afraid anymore." She turned to look at Toby, who sat beside her, calm and steady. "And he chose to stay with me." For a long moment, the judge was silent. Then finally, he spoke. "The evidence provided makes it clear that the defendant did not actively care for this dog prior to his discovery by the plaintiffs. Furthermore, it is in the best interest of the animal to remain in a stable environment where he has been well cared for." Mia's breath caught. The judge turned to the man. "The court rules in favor of the Parker family. Toby will remain in their custody permanently." Mia barely heard the rest. She was already throwing her arms around Toby, her heart swelling with relief. "We did it," she whispered. "You're home for good." The man stormed out without another word. But Mia didn't care, because she had kept her promise. Toby was home. Forever. The morning after the agility event, Mia woke up with a warmth in her heart. The memory of Toby's incredible performance played over and over in her mind. The way he had soared through the obstacles, the way the crowd had erupted in applause, the way he had stood beside her, proud and confident. She turned to find Toby curled up at the foot of her bed, his soft breathing steady and calm. For the first time since she had found him, she felt like he truly belonged. She reached out and stroked his fur. "You were amazing, Toby," she whispered. "I knew you could do it." Toby opened one sleepy eye, gave a small wag of his tail, and nestled his head back onto the blankets. Mia giggled. Okay, okay. You can sleep in." But that peace didn't last. That afternoon, as Mia and her mother sat on the porch, enjoying the crisp autumn air, a shadow fell over their front steps. Mama Tasha turned toward the sidewalk, her body stiffening the moment she saw him. A man. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a faded baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, stood at the gate. His gaze locked onto Toby, who had been lying peacefully at Mia's feet. The moment Toby saw him, something shifted. His ears flattened, his tail tucked, and his body tensed like he was expecting something bad to happen. Mia's stomach twisted. Toby looked afraid. Mama Tasha stood up, her voice calm but firm. "Can I help you?" The man's lips curled into something that was supposed to be a smile, but there was nothing friendly about it. "Yeah," he said slowly. "I think you have my dog." Mia's arms instinctively wrapped around Toby. "No," she said, her voice small but defiant. The man ignored her, his gaze never leaving Toby. "Saw him at that agility thing the other day. That's my dog. I trained him." Mama Tasha didn't flinch. "You have proof of ownership?" The man's mouth twitched, irritated by the question. "Don't need it. He knows me." Mia looked at Toby, hoping, praying that he wouldn't react, that he wouldn't show any sign that he recognized the man. But Toby's entire body was stiff. His breathing was shallow. He didn't growl, didn't bark, he just froze. Mia's heart pounded. "He's scared of him." Mama Tasha squared her shoulders. "I'm sorry, but unless you can provide actual proof, Toby stays here." The man's jaw tightened. "Look, lady, I ain't trying to start trouble. I just want what's mine." "He's not yours," Mia blurted, her voice stronger now. "You left him. He was starving and scared when I found him. He didn't have a collar. He didn't have anyone looking for him." She clenched her fists. "He's my family now." Toby shifted closer to her, pressing his body against her legs as if he knew she was standing up for him. The man let out a slow breath. "This isn't over," he muttered before turning and walking away. Mia felt the tension in her chest release slightly as she watched him disappear down the street. But the fear lingered. Mama Tasha pulled out her phone. "We need to be prepared," she murmured. Mia swallowed hard. "What are we going to do?" "We're going to fight for him." Preparing for battle. The next few days were filled with anxiety. Every time the doorbell rang, Mia's heart leapt into her throat. She couldn't shake the fear that the man would come back, that he would try to take Toby away, but Mama Tasha wasn't the kind of woman to sit back and wait for problems to come to her. She gathered every vet record, every photograph of Toby's condition when they first found him, and written testimonies from their neighbors and the Agility event staff. Then they met with a lawyer, Ms. Patterson, who specialized in cases like these. She flipped through the documents with an approving nod. "You have a strong case," she said. "This man abandoned the dog. The key will be proving that he made no attempt to find Toby before now." Mia clenched her fists. "He didn't care about him until he saw how good he was." Ms. Patterson's gaze softened. "And that's going to work in our favor." Still, the court hearing loomed over them like a storm cloud. Mia barely slept the night before. She kept her arms wrapped around Toby, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "I'll protect you," she whispered, "no matter what." The day of the hearing was cold. The courtroom felt too big, too formal. Mia sat beside Mama Tasha, gripping her hand tightly as they faced the man across the room. He had a lawyer, too, but he didn't have proof. Ms. Patterson laid out their case methodically, presenting Toby's medical records, the photos of his malnourished state when they rescued him, and the testimonies of the agility trainers who had never seen the man before. When it was Mia's turn to speak, she took a deep breath and faced the judge. "He was alone when I found him," she said, her voice strong despite the lump in her throat. "He was scared. He didn't have a collar. He didn't have anyone looking for him. But I stayed. I showed him that he didn't have to be afraid anymore." She turned to look at Toby, who sat beside her, calm and steady. "And he chose to stay with me." For a long moment, the judge was silent. Then, finally, he spoke. "The evidence provided makes it clear that the defendant did not actively care for this dog prior to his discovery by the plaintiffs. Furthermore, it is in the best interest of the animal to remain in a stable environment where he has been well cared for." Mia's breath caught. The judge turned to the man. "The court rules in favor of the Parker family. Toby will remain in their custody permanently." Mia barely heard the rest. She was already throwing her arms around Toby, her heart swelling with relief. "We did it," she whispered. "You're home for good." The man stormed out without another word, but Mia didn't care, because she had kept her promise. Toby was home. Forever. That night, as Mia lay in bed, Toby curled up beside her, his warmth steady against her legs. She ran her fingers through his fur, thinking about everything they had been through together. "I told you I'd protect you," she murmured. Toby let out a soft sigh, his tail wagging lazily. And in that moment, Mia realized something. Love wasn't just about finding someone. It was about choosing them, again and again. And Toby had chosen her, just as she had chosen him. There's something profoundly moving about dog stories. They remind us of the power of love, patience, and second chances. This heartwarming story isn't just about rescuing a dog. It's about the bond that forms when two souls find each other in the most unexpected ways. Toby's journey is a testament to resilience, proving that even the most broken spirits can heal when given the right environment. So often, animals who have been abandoned are labeled as damaged or too difficult. But what they truly need isn't pity. It's understanding, consistency, and the space to trust again. And isn't that the same for people? We all long for a place where we are safe, where we can be ourselves without fear of being discarded. Dogs don't ask for much, just kindness, patience, and a little bit of time. And in return, they give something invaluable: loyalty, unconditional love, and a quiet, unspoken promise that they will always stand by your side. That's what makes dog stories so powerful. They mirror the very best parts of what it means to love selflessly. But perhaps the most beautiful message in this heartwarming story is that love is a choice. It's not just about finding someone or something to love. It's about choosing to show up day after day, even when it's hard. It's about standing beside those who need us, even when they don't fully trust yet. And it's about proving, with actions rather than words, that they are wanted, that they matter, and that they will never be alone again. Because in the end, the greatest gift we can give, whether to a dog like Toby or to the people in our lives, is the promise that we won't give up on them. And when that trust is finally returned, when love is given back freely, it becomes something even more powerful, a forever home in the truest sense of the word. Share your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another amazing story. Together, we can shine a light on the power of doing what's right. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.